floor is yours. Stories comes from GeoRhena and speak about border GIS for the Upper Rhine.
Thanks. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce you in the GeoRhena project, cross-border GIS for the Upper Rhine. So what's the Upper Rhine? The Upper Rhine is a territory with part of France, Germany, and Switzerland. We are actually here in Strasbourg, so Strasbourg is in the center of the Upper Rhine region. This region, it has 3 countries that mean also 2 or 3 languages. Swiss German will be considered as our own language. Different language mean different culture, different working methods, different collaboration. Within this Upper Rhine region is the Upper Rhine Conference, which is an institutional framework for cross-border cooperation. Within this Upper Rhine Conference, there are several working groups, for example, in environment, spatial planning. GeoRhena is a working group of 29 persons. Geomatics, cartograph from Switzerland, Germany, and France. So presently, when you put some France, Germany, or Switzerland data together, you will have a real problem because the data will have very few correspondence from one country to other. So the work of our GeoRhena projects is to have some frontier-free maps on geodata, which is a paramount for successful territorial development. For that, we put its manual work. We work with data from 3 countries who put it together. That's a lot of work because when you put directly those data together, there will only be 10 to 20% of data who will be directly comparable. So the main purpose of GeoRhena project consists in setting common thematic definition to create common semantic model for the Upper Rhine. This is archived through a regular meeting here. I have to say that the human factor, the good knowledge of the geomatics in France, Switzerland, and Germany is really important. So the human factor for such projects is really important. Here I have also to say that GeoRhena is an old project. It starts in 2004, and that we have actually an Interreg 5 co-financing. Okay. The working process as a same word or metadata can have a lot of definition. The comparability work is often very long. We always associate experts from this thematic to validate our choice. As a conclusion, I will say that while the implementation of the Inspire directive has made it easier for GeoRhena to access metadata and even some geodata, the language barrier and the stiff application of interoperability rules at local level don't allow yet to get fine cross-border maps. Therefore, the GeoRhena and the human factor behind it still remains a valuable asset for cross-border geodata on maps for the Upper Rhine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. And the next speaker? That's not you. you are in the chair, so I decide. It's for Lee, and Lee Sandalinas comes from Image C Solutions and Zurich-based institute, is that right?
Yes, from Zurich.
So, new online contract forms, click and write, take it away. You have 5 minutes from now.
Thank you. Previously, I would like to know if you could please tell me if you're familiar with Incoterms, international commercial. Any of you is familiar with those set of clauses? No? I'll explain really fast. In order to smooth contract forms regarding international commerce, the Incoterms make easy the transactions and the international trade because they minimize the efforts because all the commercial legal actors and the companies, they already know what an Incoterm clause is. For instance, one of the main Incoterm clauses which is used in satellite private commercial trade is the ex-works clause, which means that when you see this clause in a contract, for instance, in a distribution data and imagery contract, it means that the product, such as raw data or imagery, is delivered as such straight from the factory. In this case, could be the company, the satellite company, in charge of treating the raw data and turning this raw data into a value-added data. All right, I'll go straight to the to what I'm interested in. For my doctoral thesis, I have developed a new set of trade-related rules in the style of Incoterms. Because private commercial relations in the style of Incoterms is necessary to smooth the private relations between private commercial relations between the commercial actors and smooth the trade of imagery and raw data. So that's one thing. The other thing, to reach to that agreement, I studied the current online trade. I'm sure you have acquired licenses online by clicking the I accept button, or downloaded some programs and you have agreed to the clauses. Okay, this type of contract is called a click wrap agreement. By clicking the I accept button, you accept some clauses that are delivered to you online unilaterally by the licensor. That contract could be considered as an adhesion contract. What happens with that is that as a consumer, you accept some clauses that are just delivered to you, and you have to agree without any possibility to negotiate that contract. Some issues will arise because certain terms in those contracts refer that in case you infringe or someone infringes, a third party, the contract needs to go to Denver, Colorado to sue Digital Globe. So if you are in Aalborg, or you are in Toulouse, or you are in Reykjavik, what are we doing in Denver? All right. So some consumer associations have concluded that these clauses could infringe the consumer conventions. One thing. Another two type of online contracts. One is the browse wrap agreement. Which consists of the following. Some websites, they state on the bottom of the website that by browsing in that website you accept directly to the terms, which is quite unfair from some point of view, but from another point of view could be fair from the point of view of the owner of the website. We can discuss that later. And the shrink wrap agreement, when you are delivered a software shrink into a CD-ROM, when you just unpack the package, then it means that you just, when you unseal the package, it means that you accept all the conditions delivered therein. So that's it more or less about the new online contract forms and the new set of satellite trade-related consumer rules that I've developed in my doctoral thesis. So thank you so much for your kindness. Yes.
Almost right? Yeah.
Yeah.
From GeoRhena.
Yes.
And you're going to speak about user feedback, and also because you have 2 presentations in a row, so you actually have 10 minutes. Also increased use of feature catalog.
Yeah, we start with this one.
Whatever. Take it away. You have 5 minutes, plus 5 minutes.
So This is where it started. We work for two water authorities in the Netherlands. This is a typical feature info user experience when people click on a map. And you get all these technical terms, and people find that really hard to understand. This is what you wanted. You want nice labels, and when you hover over them, you get some explanation. What does this field mean? And so where to configure this type of information? This is the ISO 19110 standard for feature cataloging, and it has three main classes which describe the feature type and the feature type attributes. And this is not used a lot in Europe, but I think is a very good way to increase the quality of your metadata. So what we added in this exercise was to, besides just a label and a type, also add a link to some online ontology. So you see here a start of a linked data approach, which is very feasible and fits within the current practices. Just to explain a bit how this could work. So this is typically a simple CSV or shapefile or something. And in this feature type, in this feature catalog metadata, you add, you say, well, these are schema.org products in this table. And this ID column, well, let's put some namespace there, and we'll have URIs minted. And the third thing is that for each column, you say, well, this is a schema.org name or length, and you see an RDF growing. And this is what it then would look like in JSON LD. One of the RDF encodings. So you have below the data, and on top you put a little context, which comes from the feature catalog metadata. So this is a really easy way to engage with linked data from traditional geo. So now we have this new draft guideline, which is presented in one of the other rooms. I think it's a very interesting topic, and please read this. This could be relevant. And for this reason, these are the 8 open data government principles from Open Data Gov. The second one says primary. What we see currently in Inspire is that a lot of people work with data and at some point transform it into something else before they publish it on Inspire, which goes against this rule. It's better to expose the data as is and use the annotations to say, so you keep the data, but you just annotate it differently. So until organizations really use the Inspire data models on the work floor, this approach is actually much better than transformation. Thank you. It's me again.
Isn't it amazing how much information you can get in 5 minutes? And you actually only used 4.
It's like booking 2 seats in the train.
Yeah, we could all learn a bit from that when we stand there with all our slides for 20 minutes. I'm speaking about myself. Go ahead.
So this is an experiment we're currently doing at JRC. So we're part of the ISA program, of the ELISA program. There's a ELISA tools project, and then there's a work package called location interoperability tools. Within that, we're sector B, which handles user feedback. This is ELISA, actually. It's my daughter. So this is the use case. This is a typical service metadata in a catalog, in this case a Dutch catalog. It's nice, you can see a bit, you can open it, view it, see who made it. But somewhere else on the web there's this page. Somebody complained about that data set having missing some attributes. Where are they? So you see Cora, my colleague from the cadastre, replying, well, la 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 la. But what we wanted was this information is here. Because people were looking for that data, but they missed that discussion. And this is where this topic is about. So this is the data on the web best practices, best practice 29 and 30, gather feedback from users and publish it on the web. they have a data model in which you can save that metadata, so you can easily share that with others. There's actually an OGC group who deals with this topic, the Geospatial User Feedback Group. And there is this one, schema.org review. So this is the one which search engines use. So what we did in this experiment, we take this product GeoNetwork open source, and we added the Geospatial User Feedback module in it. So you can store user feedback according to the OGC schema. And we created some UI elements where you can add this feedback. And then the next step would be to optimize our search algorithms to use that feedback, which data sets are more relevant than others. But firstly, it's just to show it. So the code is on GitHub, you can try it. This is how it looks like. And then you see on the side the feedbacks. So, a couple of challenges. In this spatial domain, we have a lot of harvesting. So catalogs are harvested from one place to the other. At which level do you, well, some will provide feedback on a European level, some at a local level. How are you going to notify the various partners of all this feedback available? Well, there's some mechanisms available. You could harvest the metadata through those various levels with the metadata, or you can have like somewhere a central storage where you keep all the feedback and you access that API from your various systems to say, okay, is there feedback about this thing? And if people add feedback, then store it centrally. There's a lot of aspects. So you see my colleague here from the cadastre who is managing the buildings map and the road network map in the Netherlands. They get 5,000 feedbacks a year, and he's publishing that, but not in the catalog. That's done separately. So you can do it on the data, on the metadata, on the findability, on the readability. So there's a lot of aspects to which could make the discussion quite difficult. So what we can talk about today is this. Is a catalog a good place to put feedback? It is important feedback. It will really increase the user experience and the data quality. And also I get the other way around, like, okay, do you have feedback about this data set? Because I have no idea who is using my data. In the open data domain, you have no idea who your users are. And user feedback is an important mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you. So, last in the row, but not least, Stefan Arnold, Federal Statistics Office in Germany. And your topic is SDI and crowdsourced data. So, if you're ready, we're ready. Take the 5 minutes.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I hope you had some fun and good food yesterday evening. I'm speaking here not as a knowledge carrier, but as a knowledge seeker. So I work in a working group on geospatial information under the interagency and expert group on sustainable development goal indicators. And this group has set up the 230 indicators that shall measure the 17 sustainable development goals decided by the United Nations. And they are categorized, these indicators, into tier categories. So tier 1, 2, 3. 1 means the data is available and the method is clear. Tier 2 is there is a method, but the data is still missing, so people would know how to calculate those indicators, but don't know with which data. And tier 3 is that no one has really a clue how to calculate the indicator with what kind of data set or information. So in the case there are no official data sets available to provide information for a country or globally to calculate one of those indicators where we need spatial information, what kind of alternative data sources are out there? And one possibility in theory is to use crowdsourced data or crowdsourced information or VGI, volunteer geographic information. And I have a set of questions turning around that issue, how to gain an overview, what kind of information is out there, where to find metadata on that crowdsourced data, how to assess which of them are usable for the SDG indicator measurement purposes. And once the data is found, is the one crowdsourced data source comparable with another crowdsourced data set that covers the same topic but in another region of the world? Also, who is involved in preparing himself to contribute to the SDG indicator calculation, because that's also for official sites not quite easy, because everybody is jumping on the train of the SDG indicators. And once you have created crowdsourced data or volunteer geographic information yourself, do you have enough budget to set up a spatial data infrastructure to make the world see and find your data? Or are you just happy to be able to produce the data for a small circle of users and nobody else will know that you ever have created that kind of information? So I would like to discuss that with you.
So I would invite the presentators to come up here, and I will ask you, please, to put on the first slide where we have all the items. Thank you. Just face the audience, and let's give them a hand. They have been really, really good. Really good. Thank you. So don't leave, because now you're going to work. So who would like to speak a bit more with Boris about border GIS? You go up to Boris now. Who would like to speak with Wadi on the new online contracts? Please go up to Wadi now. Then we have Paul with 2 sessions. You have to find that out when you see how many people are coming up to Paul. Police, and everybody has to engage. This is the format. So I give you 3 minutes, and then we have Stefan. Who wants to speak with Stefan about crowdsourcing? Please. You have to. Please. That is the format. So we have now 30 minutes. So 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock sharp. We meet here again, and you will present what you've discussed with the audience. You can go outside and sit at the table. You can stay here. I don't care, as long as you're back 10 o'clock and you have had some good and fruitful discussions. Is that a deal? Okay? Okay. You stand there and people will come rushing up to you, I'm sure. In just a second.
Take that part. Yeah, all of us.
Yes, please.
I would like to talk with all of it together. Maybe
Well, if it turns out that people are not really engaging, we do it by ourselves. We just kind of do a large group.
use some feedback.
How about you?
Yeah,
I'm sure you have some
that's
very
okay.
good ideas.
So Boris.
You can also take like 3 minutes with each of them, like giving them feedback on how you will speak. So please, they're waiting.
So this is one stuff.
Ladies? Yeah, come on.
So we all know each other from the Dutch Gymnasium.
Ah,
It's only you who needs to introduce yourself. Oh, you get again? Yeah.
we got some feedback with mail. We have no system to use.
So a lot of cheap liquid
We forget the solution. It's a way to facilitate our job of the
statistics are available for the economy, for the environment, for
We're doing small round.
Oh, yeah.
So we were all from the Dutch cadastre, so we already knew each other. But maybe you do it. Maybe you first.
From the National Library of Iceland. We're just since lately where we want to what the resources see this one to get information there's no problem on this down there. So we just table it. So our folder
Yeah.
so we can use this.
maybe trigger some crowdsourced platforms that will collect
the system.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Well, it's not in the core product yet, but it's a pilot. So we have a special with a separate for GeoNetwork. But we are going to make a pull request to the core product. Yeah. Yeah.
Drive to the vessel from waterhole to waterhole. If you want to somehow measure that and monitor things are working fine for those groups, you need to know where there is official data. Can ask the crowd to take some of the
uses GeoNetwork, but it
and then they search for the oasis. So this is not an official.
Separate front end.
yes, to make facilitate
Yeah. So oh yeah, maybe you introduce yourself.
open, you can find them.
Her face there.
And that works quite well. So many users find the form and put their questions and remarks on that. But it has no linkage with the metadata catalog. And I'm wondering how we can do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's quite
Yeah.
easy. That our users are not familiar with metadata. They are comments on the outside services. And that's quite separate from metadata catalog. Perhaps there are attributes which are missing or not at the right level in the service. Perhaps that
The service is invalid. That's a bad parameter, so you cannot use it. And then you get this type of questions.
all kinds of comments on web services.
Yeah.
Could be technical, but also
But so this presented this slide. There's more or less two models to share metadata between platforms. One is that you have a central repository. This could be the forum that you have, and then you engage with that forum from various systems. So that forum has an API. So the thing that you need to do is to uniquely identify the data set and link it somewhere in the forum post. So then the API can query.
I think that's what they task for someone. That link to certain comments.
It could be, but also when you create metadata on the catalog phase, and you have the form on the catalog and you store it in the forum, and you include this identifier, and later you can retrieve it back into the system. But this is much too technical, but there are ways. And hashtags. Yeah, so in that way it's like Facebook. If you tag a certain person, then this person will also be able to see that post.
But if you never know in advance which posts are coming.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's a problem, in my opinion.
People, if it's really awkward, people will notify you. This is a really awkward comment. Please remove it. Yeah, so this is my next question. For you as authorities, there will be additional work because this reviewing of the feedback.
I don't think so. I think it will improve our data. True. Of course, it will use more data, but we will be more efficient by correcting the projects when they happen. That's why I think, of course, we take a risk, but it will improve our efficiency.
Yeah.
We will see that people use our data or not. We
think
will know what.
that will work if you put the user feedback into the metadata catalog
Yes,
directly
exactly.
and not on a separate forum.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the thing you said. I have a technical comment to make. I have to leave at 2 o'clock because I have another presentation out there. So can one of you make the summary here of this? Are you able to do
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
well, then I will write things down.
If there is a simple, easy way to respond to the feedback. For example, to explain that we have done the correction,
Yeah.
where we can click on that it will the feedback could stay online, but we could because it brings they solve the
Yeah, solved. So
Yes.
currently not, but it's a good feature. We should write it
Oh,
down.
yeah,
so
that's solved.
we
Yes,
could
okay.
see if there is
Yeah,
still
because
problems or
That's
not.
another possibility, that you link the feedback to an issue tracker,
Yeah.
where you really can assign the issue to somebody, and somebody can fix it and then set solved, and there's an email to the person saying this issue is solved.
So there was one thing I was wondering about, because I saw in your pictures there were actually one looks a bit more like a review mechanism with stars.
Yeah.
Did you also consider that as
Yeah, so for now we introduce a single mechanism. Also, if you look at the schemas out there, the GeoRhena and the OGC schemas, they are more review oriented and not issue oriented. But it's for me is a first step.
Yeah.
If you identify that we really need to separate that, reviews and issues, we have to do it.
I think so.
You mentioned the stars.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's that different functionality. It's about
Yeah, but
popularity.
It is, but if you look at Booking.com and you see their reviews, but sometimes there's also questions. Yeah,
And
so
also comments on
because with the reviews is also important, and then sometimes they put questions there, and then it turns into an issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So for me, it makes sense to do it at once, once you get all this functionality again on
Yeah,
different places, and
I think, yeah, I see the difference between reviews and issues, but you're right. It's,
yeah,
reviews.
but this is one of the issues that we will talk about in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You asked us how to manage the harvesting. Which tools did you do?
No, so currently we don't have any real implementations.
D'accord,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is a research
D'accord.
exercise, and I'm really looking forward to work with you to
It
have.
is ready.
Probably not for your use case. There is a skeleton.
But what did you? What do you think about to collect all the
Well,
feedback in a place or?
I like this idea of harvesting, and in a way, this is also what search engines do. And they harvest, they crawl your content, and they say, hey, this is a review. I see also problems with the harvesting, with the different levels. So feedback on a European level will be of a much other nature than feedback on a regional level. Here it will probably be the road is not like this. There will be the service is not working. And I have no answer to that yet. We just have to, I think we just have to engage with this and see where it goes. And then we can always change it.
I think feedback on Euro level is relevant as feedback on local level.
Yes.
To
steps going after that.
Yeah, we looked a lot at Facebook and booking and this type of.
That's fine.
But also tell about your
Yeah,
successful
that's
story. It's really nice.
because I didn't interview Mr. Sven.
Oh yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
also working at
Yeah, that's fine.
And we actually implemented user feedback mechanism, but only about the content of 3 key data sets in the Netherlands.
Good thinking.
And we launched it a year ago, and what we can see is that it's growing in feedback, giving people, and automatically send it to the different governments who created the data. And they also react very positive. So we, when we started, we were around 5 or 10 feedbacks per day on the data set, and now it's growing to 10 to 20 data sets. So there are the topographical data sets.
Yeah, which one?
So the small scale and large scale topography. So
What?
small scale and large scale topography, and also the addresses and buildings. But there's also a lot of interest of other data sets who will join. So we're now currently more focusing on the contents of data sets, connecting new data sets, but also they complement it. It's interesting.
This is your theme.
How to give you?
This is the gift.
Thank you. So, what my question to you would be, did you ever consider to use any of these schemas, like a DUV or schema of preview? So use case would then be that other operators would harvest your feedback and display it in another context.
Yeah.
There's a privacy concern there, right? But
No, we publish all the feedback also as open data, also in the catalog.
But how do you put anonymized or?
Yes. So when they give their feedback, they can put in, for example, their email address. So we can also contact them. They will automatically be updated when, for example, the issue is accepted. Thanks a lot. But that information we don't expose it. But the information about for example, what's in the feedback, where is the feedback, that it's located on the map, and also the reaction of the good government organization, that's all exposed. So it's now more as a WMS and WFS service.
Are users allowed to upload screenshots or something like that?
Yeah, that's also the attachment, but also the attachment we don't expose them as open data because sometimes the personal data and like a picture of people. So it only goes to the government, but that's the data.
Is that involved in this solution?
No, but I think I'm gonna talk a bit more. To put no, it's not. You mean a picture in the solution?
Yes, it's really helpful.
Yes. So I always have 2 questions. Like, is it supported by the schemas? There is a citation option. So I think you can put an image somewhere on the web and cite it from the feedback. Yeah, but I'll take it.
It's also a bit how we communicate the attachment. So we upload it ourselves, publish a link, and the link will go.
Yeah, so it's a good idea.
You have to create an account?
Currently not. It's now you can edit anonymously, but you can also leave your email address if you want to be updated.
Yeah.
It's not enlarged to
Login.
get it. Give your email address.
No, but you can easily localize it to your local requirements.
Because if you want as data provider have insiders using that service or accept them, there has to be any information about that user that cannot be anonymous.
But
Limits the user.
we also did it.
But sometimes if you get notified of a bad service, you don't. It's not really necessary to know who said it.
I think
But then the advantage for
The user is less.
data provider is less because
Well, he knows the servers is bad.
Doesn't know who it is.
Yeah.
Who uses it.
But what you see at our system is also there is not an obligation to fill in your email address. But I think 80 or 90% of all people will fill in their email address just because they want to be notified about when it's updated and stuff.
So 90%
But still fill in its email address. Yeah.
I think the usability of the system will depend on the number of feedbacks, right? Because if you have too much feedback, the system will be difficult to manage. I think when I think it's a metadata with a data with a couple of feedbacks, if it's very, very much, for example, for the address system, maybe we need something very more decided for the segment of things.
Yeah.
because you're afraid to get overwhelmed by all these
Yes. I think
Yeah.
it's useful when you have some feedbacks, but for data very specific, maybe it's not. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, well, for example, the addresses data set is created by the municipalities in the Netherlands, and so the 10 or 20 feedbacks per day will be divided among 300 government agencies. So that makes it much more better to process. So there are not really complaints yet about there is too much
The
feedback.
community respond themselves. Each community.
The people who are giving feedback, they come themselves, and the governments have a kind of obligation to respond.
There is an obligation on your how do you manage stuff in your organization. You give you 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, but they
to
have,
make the work. Or,
yeah, they have kind of obligation to respond within a week, just to assess it the first time. So not
yes.
so they can choose from, well, I accept it or I reject, but also I need more research, and especially in the topographical data sets. There is, for example, new aerial imagery is necessary before they can accept it. So, but people like that, so there is a first quick comment, and then it could take longer, some months, a year, and yeah.
How to react on alignments? The people who manage the data, are they satisfied with this system?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Especially for example, about the topographical data sets, they first complained, yes, we ask people to give feedback, nobody gives feedback, and then we get the new imagery. Then we thought, whoa, there are a lot of difference. Now we have to really work hard. Now it's more of a continuous process. They like that.
I want to bring in another topic, is that I think and some portals already do this, you can also use the crowd to suggest new data sets.
Yeah.
So if you have a missing, if the citizens experience a missing, they cannot find the data sets.
Like in the metadata.
In the catalog, they cannot find the metadata in the catalog. So maybe the data set is not there, and it should be, so we can contact the authority. Or it is there, but they cannot find it.
Yeah.
And how do you integrate this feedback in your system? It's a forum next to, or
Yeah, so we want to use the same storage mechanism, but a different user interface. And another topic is we can also ask users how we can improve the metadata. Yeah. So we can. That's why we make the step approach. Like first step, we just give the comment, and the second step, say, okay, you want to help more to improve this data set, and maybe you know new keywords that we could use to make this more findable.
They can add themselves kind of things.
Yeah. But also I liked your comment saying you should not ask too much, because then people don't want to send it. So that's why we have this step process.
Yes,
You do the basic first, and then you want to add some more feedback, please go ahead.
Maybe you can begin
I think it's interesting to know the priorities of the users, because we have a lot of data sets, and we have a lot to do.
And then do you already get a lot of feedback? Do you have a feedback button?
No. but it's not data oriented. There is no, we have no.
When it's free. Yeah.
To it for feedback.
We have it on the Dutch portal, but it's not used much because maybe it's a bit hidden.
It's on the record level as a feedback button, but it's not very much used. One of two times.
Could be two problems, or the portal is not used, or
When you said earlier that you wanted the user maybe to take a snapshot and why wouldn't the user just be browsing the data and see the whole road? You just click on the road and it's like pops up and it's directly linked to the picture that you're going to point to.
this is what his application
Yes.
does.
Okay. So
So
that
is
is
it-
the
Well, you put a pin on the map, say here. This.
Yes,
yeah.
but I'm not meaning that.
Okay.
Or the attribute, so it's this attribute is wrong.
Yes, even though you could have WMS services there, you could have something like online
Yeah.
that you would link to.
Feature info,
Yes,
and then
it's like and you would say like make a box and then you click on this subject
yeah.
or this feature and then you just write this feature is one code there's no road here, something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have it directly linked to the database.
Yeah.
And I think that is more like that is better used for the user that you don't have to go like make a snapshot of it. And it's like, is it that one or that one? And so it's more precise and goes straight to the database.
And
I think it's
also
like a little bit more database thinking.
That works when there are problems on database issues.
Yes, absolutely.
But there could also be other feedback from
Yeah.
someone related to that.
There are separate categories of feedback.
I have a technical committee, so I have to leave. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you for making a good summary on the.
don't thank me yet.
Thank you for, I think we should only have 5 minutes speeches.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And one of the notes that we could take actually is that there should be some forum where there are 5-minute speeches where someone has a solution that they have created
They can put them.
and they just make a 5-minute speech and put it on the forum. So it's for like fixing this and they
Mention to it.
Yes.
So continue discussion. You have another 10 minutes.
Thank you.
I have to go.
Thank you. Just move to the other group and here we go.
Yes, what is important too is that the feedback is shared with all the users.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there are possibilities to do a feedback, but we think other people don't it's not useful to do it again.
Yeah.
The fact that it's shared and that people know
Yeah.
the problems. It's important to know there is a problem. That's why the user will be, even if the administration we don't have time to respond, we will be sure that the users will be notified that there is a point on to focus on attention.
For that purpose, we have a notification service. People can themselves home with their email address.
Okay.
We send them active messages about problems
They can
or there are new services.
for a data center.
And people like that because they can be in their inbox and there's something new, something is wrong, or they think they need to work.
But I think it's really important to be transparent also.
Yes.
What's happening with it, because that was one of the problems we wanted to tackle. Because people were sometimes sending an email,
Yes.
then they never heard about it again, and then they thought, well, one sent us a second email, so yeah.
Actually, I know there are problems. People told me, there is so much to do that I can. I don't know what is the most important. Sure, there are several. It's a way to organize the work in a certain community.
I think Paul's solution is a very good option for getting feedback on metadata.
Yes. exactly.
That's about metadata, that's not about other
Yes,
aspects or
but,
service related issues.
But yes, we can add other uses. People who know the system is metadata will be able to go to the metadata and add the feedback. But the data set, there is no link with the metadata.
Yes.
You have more or less covered ground, so you ready?
Yeah, we're page.
I'm just going to give you
We have a lot of, I think we have a lot of data or metadata, but published is compliant with Inspire, but it's a mess and it's difficult to find the metadata. And they are not, there is no maintenance.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes, but it's they use a really visibility, easy research, and sure results. Maybe it would help if the public sees that it's too old, or just drop it, or you can access the data. I think it would be really useful to have a system.
Yeah, we have thought the same. So when you publish data, you will publish metadata, but then you never look at it again.
Yes, it's
never updated it.
Yes.
your son.
I didn't go to the presentation about unique ID for short period, but I think there is a link to find a metadata with an ID, to find the metadata, the feedback.
Yeah, so
And
to link
it's
it all
very
together.
I think it's very important. Because we are harvesting metadata with price and sometimes there is no good link. We don't know we publish in a place, we don't know the future metadata on the it could be they will have a good visibility, but they have all data that no.
Technical challenging, but it's very create really a community
Yes.
that cares about it.
In France, you don't have a culture of the administration is not very, I think, close to the public, and there is no actually, for example, there is no way to get feedback. Generally, for special things, we have to go for when there is a specific consultation or project or work, but when there is everyday work, there is no there is no try to it's not a future, but since our ministry is at the end the project.
Yeah.
And it's coming thanks to the news about access to Irish patent. I think it's coming, but it's not. We have no. Yes, we have another step to go really in a way to give the possibility of to give this opinion on all that we and there is a fear also, I think, about we criticize. I don't know.
Yeah, there are. We had the same fears in the Netherlands, so but we should always just do it. Right, in Ireland also we did it. Just making a simple system with ArcGIS in mind also, and people really liked it, and also because you really can improve the quality of your data. So yeah, what's more important that you're.
People know their opinion on the
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why they make you closer to the administration.
Yeah, exactly. So even this, so you can now send in your feedback anonymously, and we'll publish it over the web. So it can be dangerous because they say really shitty things.
Yes, that's the fear of some.
Yeah, but they didn't do it yet. So within a year, so more fun places to go on the internet to say shitty things. Yeah, I work 4 days a week in the Dutch cadastre and 1 day a week in the university. So I'm here. We have the university course and all stuff. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
She ran away crying. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is now 10 o'clock. And it's so nice to see that there's still discussing. The last ones are coming in. So I'm sorry to break up your good discussion. This is really the heart and the key of this session is that we actually need. So now I would ask the group leaders or the presenters or however you arranged it to come up here in 5 minutes, just try to sum up what you discussed. Is that okay? And Boris, the first guy.
Okay, thank you. So it will be short. We spoke about 2 points. The first point is the importance of the human factor with cross-border data. This metadata generally have one language. When you come from another country, you get this metadata. You don't speak this language, there is a problem. So the human factor, when you know an expert in the other country, you can have a phone call, you can say, what's exactly in this data, metadata? Can we compare it with our data? So Inspire bring a lot, but the human factor still remain important for cross-border data. That's the first point. The second point was about the 10 or 20% of comparable data from 3 countries. So I told when you put French, German, Swiss data together, only 10 to 20% will be directly comparable. So all the rest of the data, to get some cross-border geo data, you will have a lot of work. So that was the second point.
Okay.
Really short.
Thank you. I can't spell that, but you know what it is. So I guess it's you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, as far as I understood, there's a conference here referring to what if. What if Inspire would have been enacted today, knowing what we know today? Perhaps we would have done it a bit different than the 2007 directive was written, because we have more knowledge, we have more conclusions, and we have done a deeper and the deepest study as possible today. According to the way I see it, harmonizing is interesting, but also creating a bottom-up solution is also desirable, because then we know the reality, what's happening so far. So abstract laws are necessary, but also real laws are really needed by the satellite operators, because harmonizing is good, but also simplifying transactions is a much nicer scenario for all the satellite operators. So as far as I understood, a bottom-up solution consisting of all the, because I tried to convince about my theory of the new satellite trade terms in the style of Incoterms. So a bottom-up solution based on the real practice could enhance and could ease the transactions between satellite operators. I mean satellite operators, and I refer to satellite companies, ground station distributors, end user license end user licensors or licensees. The list is endless. So, as far as I'm concerned, everything is what.
Cool. Thank you.
There is so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Stand in for Anulenas.
Yeah, really.
And thank you for standing in.
Yeah.
Paul had to be in another session with his presentation.
Yeah, he somehow managed to give 3 presentations in 1 hour, so that's quite an accomplishment. But so I have to stand in. But yeah, I'm Jaap Schaukma. I work at the Dutch Cadastre, and I'm also the product owner of the Dutch Cadastre's feedback system. So I'm not that far away of the topic, luckily. And what we found out is there are actually what Paul was presenting is that you have 2 kinds of giving feedback. So you can raise issues about, for example, the contents of the data, technical issues, and for example, a service doesn't work or linkage are broken, and of course, very important, the metadata. What we also saw in his presentation, that you can also review the metadata by giving stars. And well, we somehow discussed the linkage between the issue tracking feedback and also the reviewing feedback. So of course, when you give a review with a 1 star, probably there is an issue. But it's good to have them both, I think, in your metadata portal. And why it's important is because as data provider, you will publish your data and you will also publish your metadata, and then you never look at it again. So it's good to create a community who does actually care about the metadata. Also, when they can't find the metadata, that they perhaps can add, for example, tags to make it more easier to find it for other people. And also, I think it's all about creating a community about
the metadata, also with a forum with several feedback options. And what's also important about the feedback option is that it is transparent, so people can really see what's happening with it. And I think it will improve all metadata portals worldwide a lot. So, thank you.
Yeah, we were in a small group in the corner discussing the question of, is there a way to create a spatial data infrastructure to harvest crowdsourced data besides the official institutions that provide information. And luckily I had a good talk with a French colleague, and he told me about their situation, where you have the official national SDI portal that collects all Inspire services and metadata from local or regional SDI sub-portals. But there's another geoportal called data.gouv, which is the far better known platform, and people would use that instead of the official national Inspire platform. And there you can find any kind of spatial data or services of spatial data, as long as it's open data. That can be an Inspire dataset or datasets from OpenStreetMap, for example, services, or other crowdsourced initiatives that provide somehow a browsable service. And the government has decided to make a contract with a company. It's called ETA Lab, and they design and maintain this platform. So it's not a governmental organization that is responsible for that, but they subcontracted a company to do so. And this was actually, I was hoping to see such an example where you have one single point of contact where you can search for several data sources outside the authoritative world of spatial data. And but it's a bit difficult to standardize that, because once you have a crowdsourced information, they don't need to fulfill Inspire specifications, so they can vary a lot from each other. So they call it somehow a data jungle, but at least there is a way to find those data sources. And well, inside Europe you always can look through the Inspire portals, but outside Europe, on a global perspective, you will not have Inspired national data portals. So these open data portals, as long as there is one on a national level, would gain a lot of importance in that process in the future times. So yes, and this is the information I will take with me and report about that in the next meeting of that special working group. So there is actually already some good practice examples how they can be organized besides the official spatial data paths. Thank you, and especially thank you.
Remark on that? Yeah, definitely. But let's just, I think Stefan had
I think it would be very interesting if that crowdsourcing platform would be harvested by the new open data portal, because then it will be integrated in the European data portal as well. Because it's open data, I think it should be available there as well. But that harvesting perhaps is not ready yet, but I think that's also important to add to the European data portal.
Yeah, good point. And it's just to make clear, I was not just looking for ideas for open data. It can be restricted data, as long as it's accessible for a national statistical authority who can then calculate the SDG indicators to report towards the United Nations. So it's not necessarily open data, but existent or accessible somehow. Okay, thank you.
now you have the opportunity to ask one of the presenters that you didn't engage with any questions, or whatever you want to come with remarks on the phone, for instance. We will gladly learn more. Yes, please.
I have a question or a suggestion to you. Are you in contact with the LANUF, the German? It's the environmental ministry of North Rhine-Westphalia, because I have contact to a colleague in that house, and he was telling me about that kind of project where they want to harmonize along the River Rhine maps and spatial information. First I thought that's the project, but there was also Netherlands involved. So it's probably another regional initiative, and they have the same problem. They want to harmonize spatial data from both sides. And yesterday I presented about the Eagle data model, which is a vehicle to compare different nomenclatures with each other and analyze them semantically. So we can do that bilaterally, so if you're interested in
Yes, there are several cross-border projects. Actually, we are only working on the Upper Rhine regions territory, so I don't know about North Rhine-Westphalia. No.
Further downstream.
Okay, yeah. There is also a big cross-border GIS project by the Grande Région between Belgium, France, Luxembourg, and part of Germany, so Saarland, Rheinland-Pfalz, yes. And there was, but this project is now finished, cross-border project between Netherlands and Germany. We are open to okay.
So, network is created. That's fantastic. Yes, Hugo, please.
I actually saw a kind of a cross-cutting element between all the different issues which were presented today. Let me start with the VGI thing for the SDGs.
And for those who are not good at abbreviations?
The volunteer geographic information or the citizen science thing, the volunteered stuff which is brought by citizens, and can it be used for the SDGs. The SDGs at the moment, even the ones for which the Commission is preparing the data to go to UN, right? They are extremely strict on methodologies, data sources. Even data from Copernicus has difficulties in entering into the current SDGs being reported because the time series is not long enough, etc., etc. So if we start talking about using volunteer information from citizen science or whatever, that's going to be extremely difficult to get it into this statistical rigid world. Because it's very rigid, huh? Statisticians are strange people from that point of view. Especially if you consider, I heard that in the conference you have lies, then you have big lies, and then you have statistics. But anyhow, so if you have your VGI, it's something that we are working a lot on at the moment. And then I look at Paul's feedback mechanisms, the control mechanisms, right, that are implemented also for commercially available public data like the cadastral offices. They are now discussing how can you, when somebody reports an invasive alien species or something else, how can we verify that this is not fake data, which is very popular. So I have a cross element between the VGI thing and the work that Paul was presenting there. And then if we then take it to the cross-border and the discussions that we had with Jordi, fact is that although you have these technical problems, the 20% of which are comparable, how comparable are your conditions for access and use? How comparable are the licenses that you have, the liability around it? And this is also an obstacle when me as a user, I want to bring together the data from these different public authorities and do something in that river basin. So that's a concrete problem, and it can be simplified, as Jordi tried to explain to us, but we are not lawyers, but we did our best to understand it. I have a lot of lawyers around me on a day-to-day basis, that's why I'm so stressed usually. But it's clear that there is a lot of way freedom for simplification also in that area, on a bottom-up approach, because all these things, as Jordi explained, it's a lot of top-down. The provider says this and that. So there was a nice cross-cutting element between these three. A lot of food for thought.
Absolutely. Thank you for that input. Yes, Ace?
Just one final remark on the on this form. This I think this 5 minutes form is brilliant, and I think it could be used more like in forum where people would come up with some solutions or some tasks that they're working with, and to make a 5 minutes presentation and then put it on the net in some forum. And when you are looking for some problem solving and so on, you could, have the 5 minutes presentation on how someone, made the fix on it. So instead of just going through a lot of text and finding discussions and so on, people would have the opportunity to do this because it's really effective.
It's a very good idea. I can see it. I can see it now. You come up with the same solution and people go, oh, great. Or you present a problem and somebody comes up and says, that's the solution. Very, very good idea. John?
Just a small remark. I mean, the thing is that 10 years after the directive has been enacted, we are speaking about what would we have done if we would have worked with the directive today. The thing is that if we let this opportunity to go away and we don't have a direct work on it right now, and we don't publish a recommendation or any legislative initiative within the next 6 months, then we will find a new directive amending this directive 10 years from now, where we will be in another reality. So in my take on it is that we before enacting a law or a regulation, lawyers, judges, prosecutors, all these legal freaks, that we have no idea about the reality, we should ask the commercial operators and the institutions, what do you really need? Which are your fears, or which are your concerns? Then we start from there, we take it from there, and when we work on something realistic. Otherwise, we'll find the same issue 10 years from now. And that would be a pity, because today, according to all the meetings I'm having, it's a nice opportunity to bring it up to public institution and to work fast on it, on a realistic and useful regulation or regulatory effort. That's what I would like to say. Yeah.
How could we do that? How could we bring legal and SDI experts together and get a fruitful discussion?
Like a lobby based, for instance, or we could reunite a lobby of professionals in a meeting, perhaps organized by the European Commission, because I think that the European Commission should be the first entity interested in smoothing all the commercial transactions, because otherwise they will be themselves in a position, a very complicated position, because it's not about enacting a law and saying, hey, you have to do something about, for instance, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Do something, provide us with the answers. Well, now you have the answers. What are we going to do about it? So perhaps the European Commission could host a meeting in this regard, because I think that's the first body interested in this type of amendments. Otherwise, I see that the Commission will be in a very difficult position, because if the Commission does not hear us, then courts will have a lot of job to do. Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to comment? You can say anything.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the, kind of fear of fake news coming from VGI. In the Netherlands, we have now a kind of experience of for the topographical data sets, having a feedback mechanism introduced. And we first of all we get a lot more feedback than we get before. So first we got around 50 a year by email. Now we get around 5,000 a year. So that's much more. But we all assess them. So if we check them if they are right. And actually we found out that well, I think 5, perhaps 10% of all the feedbacks is rejected. And most of the feedback is rejected because it doesn't fit in the data model. So people come up with stuff like, well, here's a lamppost, but well, the lampposts aren't in the data model. So we have actually quite good experience with just well, don't have any barriers to give feedback, but just give feedback and then we assess it, and it works quite well. So don't get feared of it. Yeah. Well, the other remark, and that I agree with you, is that by getting rid of all the barriers in VGI, there is also a very free form. So the only thing we have is a free text field. So I agree that it would be difficult to get there some statistics out of it because it's just text forms, and when we get well, a long form for filling in attributes and stuff like that, then people will not fill in it anymore. So that could be difficult.
Well, you talked about the reliability of VGI volunteered information, right? You say, oh, this is suspicious because anybody can do. Does this really reflect reality? Are they trying to play a trick on their neighbor? You never know. At the same time, what do we say about so-called authenticated official data, which mapping agencies and so many say we are the source, we underline. Recently we had a beautiful case in Flanders, 2. One was the forest map of Flanders and the destination attribution of these forest parcels. They stayed online for about 3 days. Then the minister pulled it back, because there was so much litigation and complaints from people. Oh, this is not accurate, this is not precise, this is not true. Our beautiful map had to go away. Well, maybe they should have kept it online and collected all this feedback instead of panicking. A few weeks later, another thing was brought online. It was the map of the hunting concessions. Now, a hunting concession needs to have a minimum surface, otherwise you cannot hunt there. It makes probably perfect sense, otherwise the bullets would be flying around your ears. But the guys at the time were actually the hunter associations. And they said, well, there's beautiful pastures here. Oh shit, we don't have enough hectares here. Oh well, you know, let's just draw a line around this school and this private property and this guy's garden and all that. And suddenly, it appeared on the map. So we had on the television, we had these people standing there in their back garden. I'm in a hunting area. Well, the map didn't stay long on the web. Back to the drawing board. So these were excellent examples of so-called authoritative data, where now you had this VGI stuff. It was really funny, but it kind of crosses these links. Sorry for these anecdotes, but I thought they may be a little bit relevant.
I want to share a thought that yesterday went through my head. When we have this data jungle where just everybody puts any kind of information somewhere, be it fake news or not, or be it accurate or not, or be it searchable or not, if we step outside that and look into something totally different, like Facebook, for example, or Google analyzing your browsing behavior, there are so many clever people trying to figure out who you are, how rich you are, where do you spend your money on, where you go day by day, by just concluding from other informations they have, mobile phone movements. So why aren't such clever people not working in the geospatial world and trying to figure out how can I find data, how valid is the data, how plausible are entries in a VGI data set, in a data portal jungle, which does not follow rules like Inspire specifications. So there must be also a way to do that. If a software is capable of recognizing my face stepping out of a tram in Paris somewhere with 3 image frames and recognizing, oh, that's him, that's the terrorist, why can't we transfer that kind of intelligence and knowledge into searching the web for valid and usable, helpful spatial data? So.
Wow, that's the time for the next workshop. Very interesting. Thank you. So we are close to closing. I would like to thank you all for your active participation. I mean, this format cannot work if not everybody is participating, and you have been very good presentations, absolutely. You stuck to the time. I'm very impressed Friday morning. And let me just briefly try to sum up here. So we have the human factor, very important, right? And we have the thoughts of how would we start now if we should implement Inspire, and it was really about getting the lawyers and the SDI experts to speak together. We had the feedback important. Yeah, there could be fake news, but the feedback, the amount of information is important. So give us feedback, but maybe we should speak about having some kind of standard or format that are comparable across borders. And then we had an example of a platform that is actually working with the open source. And the whole crowdsource, the whole engaging people who are out in reality has been actually the clue word for this session, I think. And we need to dig into that very, very much more than we do now in the SDI, I think. People who actually live out there know how it looks. We don't always in our lab institutions. So thanks a lot. I think this format is here to stay. We can improve it. You are released 1 minute before time. Thank you very much.